Welcome back everyone, and in this video today I want to start to have a look back at 2024. Not in terms of the races this year, which have been extraordinary, that'll be in the next video, but in terms of these. And not these in particular, but these are pretty excellent. But running shoes in general that I've bought this year that have got me through those 20 plus races and over 1,000 miles on road and trail this year. So let's go. Natural place to start when it comes to talking about running shoes is the daily trainer. It's the everyday workhorse. The shoe I covered at the start of the year in the channel around February time, the Brooks Glycerin 21. This particular one has 515 miles on it since I picked it up in February, and it has indeed been the reliable workhorse I'd intended it to be. Pretty respectable amount of wear on the outsole given how many miles it's done through the 4 seasons here is to be expected. And I feel no noticeable degradation on the midsole at all of this shoe. It still feels as responsive as the day I stepped out in it. And I'm sure I could get another 150, 200 miles out of this shoe before it needs replaced. Although it will be replaced in February next year with version 22. I have no hesitation with replacing this like for like next year, because if you look at the upper especially, there's been no wear really whatsoever on that. And I say the outsole has plenty left in it despite a little bit of wear. Highly recommend this to anyone who has a neutral foot strike, likes a bit of cushioning, maybe isn't sold on those max cushion shoes that don't necessarily work for me. I'll come to that later on. Something a little bit more traditional, but still plenty of stack height in there. Definitely one of my favourite shoes of the year. As boring as that might be, this is with me midweek easy runs, recovery runs, long runs, park runs. This can do absolutely everything. Going to give this a 9 out of 10. Definite change of pace then for the next shoe. The next one is the Nike Alphafly version 1. And this is a repurchase of a shoe I'd previously used extensively in the past, especially for half and full marathons. I managed to pick one of these up in a sale in the new year there at the start of the year and used it mainly for half marathons this year. This was my shoe for Antrim Coast half, Prague half, and really like this shoe for running in. And I have to specify running in because walking or standing in this shoe just is not comfortable at all. With this kind of decoupled bit in the midsole where the AirPods are here, how aggressive that plate is going up into it and how narrow it is in that forefoot. You can sort of see the way it sort of cuts in there and doesn't give you very much room at all for your arch. Your arch kind of hangs over that. But for some reason, the geometry of this shoe just really works for the way I run and keeps me on that forefoot a lot of the time. Even when you do fall back slightly onto your heel, so much padding and protection there. And it's just such a nice shoe to run in, just as long as you take it off as soon as you finish that run. And I absolutely recommend this for anyone who wants to run sort of mid to forefoot for sort of longer distance. If you can stay there, brilliant. If you're mainly a heel striker, it may not be the best shoe just because the geometry kind of wants to push you onto the forefoot. I give this a strong 8 out of 10. Definitely my favourite racing shoe. So next up then is the most expensive shoe on this list today. It's a Nike Alphafly number 3, the third version of the Alphafly we just talked about. And again, got it at a slight discount, £235 in August there. I didn't love this shoe. I used this in Great North Run, Berlin Marathon and Dublin Marathon. Each time it gave my hamstrings a bit of fatigue that I wasn't used to. Something about the way they've changed the geometry in this shoe has made it more comfortable to wear. There's certainly that. Feels more natural than Alphafly 1, but just did not work for my stride at all. Didn't feel as much benefit as from the Alphafly 1, and it just left my legs feeling in a worse state. I'd probably give this a 6 out of 10 just because I know it works for so many people and it is quite comfortable for a carbon plated super shoe, just not one for me. This will be kept for 5 and 10Ks, maybe a shorter distance shoe going forward. Next then to the trails. which I moved to this year a little bit more with the Mozart 100 race, among others. And this was the first shoe I bought this year. Again from Nike, the Nike Zagama, which is their kind of premium training shoe with the Zoom X foam carried over from the Vaporfly and Alphafly racing shoes, but in a more obviously trail ready package with the more firm carrier foam around it. So you still get that kind of cushioning and a little bit of bounce, but it's a little bit more firm for the trails where you don't want yourself to be wobbling all over the place. And we'll come to a shoe that does that next. I really like this shoe. This was the one that got me through all of the training really for that Mozart 100 race in Austria in May time. This was around Tollymore, Ballyboli Forest, Woodburn Forest near me multiple times. Pretty good grip in the bottom. I don't think Nike are known as having the best grip on the trail shoes, but certainly for the trails I run on, it was plenty for the training. And I do really recommend these. Really comfortable. Have this little piece here that stops stones getting in as easily, which is really key on trails. Not waterproof, but they're quite breathable, so you get water in there, it comes out pretty easily. So yeah, definitely recommend these to anyone. To say 7 out of 10 for these for a trail shoe. Definitely pick them up. You could race in them. They're quite light as well, and I say they have obviously Nike's premium foam, so highly recommended these ones. They have a second version out this year. I looked at, but they have gained weight, gained stack height, which again isn't great for staying stable in the trail. So I would say if you can pick these up under £100 now, I would go for it. Then on to the race shoe for the trails this year, specifically for the Mozart 100 light race in Austria in June. For that, I picked this shoe up, the Saucony Endorphin Edge. And this shoe was a bit of a risk. I read it in the reviews before. The soft, bouncy foam, Power Run PB from Saucony's race shoes included here, along with a slotted carbon plate to kind of increase that rigidity side to side. But it's still quite pliable when you come down on a rock, and it can be a bit dicey for the ankles. Grip wise, it's actually pretty good. Now, nothing could really deal with the conditions on the day in Austria. It was an absolute mud bath, so that's not the shoe's fault. It did give way quite a few times. But other than that, very comfortable shoe. Very good lockdown here. Quite a wide fit along the front. So if you've got wide feet, this is definitely a shoe for you. In fact, I think the front of it's one of the wider shoes between trail and road I've actually run in. So if you've got wide feet, this is a pretty good shoe to pick up for the trails. I give this a 7 out of 10. Again, very bouncy. You can probably run a lot faster than I'm capable of in this shoe. And it's probably more for the longer distances. Still quite light for the size of it, but it's built to protect the legs on the trails over those longer distances. Really like this one though. So the last shoe I can't really say too much about because I just picked it up last week in the Black Friday sales. £79 I think it was from Start Fitness, and it's this one, the Adidas Adios SL2. And yeah, it's light, it's built for a bit of speed work. It's a shoe I kind of needed in that kind of rotation, as people would call it. I have my daily shoe, the racing shoes, trail shoes, but nothing to pick up the pace during the week at the track, which is where this is going tonight. And so this kind of fills that gap. A lightweight racing fit shoe, very narrow here through the midsole, and even the forefoot as well. Just wraps to the foot and enables you to sort of pick the pace up a lot more than potentially the Brooks would. It's a little less bulky than the Brooks, albeit they're both very light shoes. So that's where this shoe is going to come in to my rotation, as it were, over the coming months, hopefully. But can't really say much more than that. Can't really recommend it or otherwise. I did pick it up on the back of a lot of recommendations from people I run with and other YouTubers and bits like that. So fingers crossed this is a good one. Also have to mention a couple of shoes I picked up during the year that I didn't put on the channel because they didn't last. Both, funny enough, were ASICS shoes. First of all was the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris, which I picked up and I wore for one training run and just had to send them back. They weren't for me. The ASICS ones for me felt too narrow, far too unstable. Propulsive, yes, but it was pushing me to the side as much as forward, it felt like, so just did not work for my sort of quite wide feet. And the next shoe is quite a big surprise actually to me and I'm sure many others. If you search YouTube for people's favourite running shoes of the year, the ASICS Superblast will be 80-85% of people's pick, at least in the top 5. But for me, I picked these up in July, used them for a couple of races, one in Cookstown, used them also for a couple of training runs, a longer run, and then I just sold them on. They just did not work for me at all. They actually felt really good, quite unnatural, but again, just far too unstable. The stack height being over 40 millimeters in the heel just must not work with my running style, with my gait. My ankles were in quite a bit of pain every time I ran in them for whatever reason. So not to say they're not a good shoe, I couldn't judge them, they just did not work for me. And just touch on next year then, the shoes I'm looking forward to coming up. The Glycerin 22 from Brooks is kind of a no-brainer. I got on so well with the 21. Over 500 miles in these guys now. So it's natural to look to the next version to just eat up those easy recovery and long runs next year. I'm also interested in Brooks' latest racing shoe. Up until now, their racing shoes have had their daily, let's say, foam in it, not the PEBA-based stuff that you see in all the rest, the Nikes, Adidas, ASICS. But they're changing that this year. So the Brooks Hyperion Elite 5 will have PEBA-based foam, and so far, what I've seen, it looks really well received. So I'm very interested in maybe picking that one up next year and seeing how it goes, given how well I get on with their daily shoes. And lastly then, possibly another trail shoe, another trail racing shoe for a bit more of a technical trail race, because there might be a big technical trail race in the calendar next year. Might be. But just to finish off, even though it's difficult to compare all these shoes, there's different purposes, different surfaces, my favourite shoe of the year still has to be this, the Brooks Glycerin 21. It's kind of a boring choice because there's no carbon plate in here, no exciting foam, it's not a fast shoe, but this got me over 500 miles training so far this year, and is probably going to have to get me another 150 miles before I replace them with the new version next year. So yeah, if you can get these in discount, especially now they're down near £120, you can't really go wrong with them. They're very light for the size of them as well, is another thing I'd say. I don't work for Brooks, by the way, I just love these. Anyway, thanks very much for joining me on a shoe roundup of the year. Next up, I'll talk about the races. I'll see you in the next one.